Guys, welcome back. I have Coach Henry Torano on with me today, and it is the New Year's time. However, we don't want to get into the standard conversation that a lot of people get into about what is your New Year's resolution. We actually want to talk today about the differences between goals and goal setting and fantasies. And I think that that's a really interesting one for a lot of, well, athletes or high performers. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot about lately is Bill Gates's quote that we often overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10 years. And so I like that concept, and I want to just go back and forth with Henry on how do you understand goals versus fantasies being something that has no likelihood of coming true. So Henry, I'd love to kind of open the conversation by how would you define a goal as compared to a fantasy?
Um, well, first off, I think that would be the number one problem that keeps people from setting goals. Is not having the balls to actually come out and say, like, openly say, I want to do this. And where we get caught up in kind of overreaching or overestimating goals is for the same reason. You're intimidated to actually put a reasonable goal out there because there's a legit chance that you may not make it. But if you write down a fantasy for a goal, then it's just so far out there that if you nobody really expected you to make it anyway. So it's kind of like, oh well, I just it was a lofty goal.
So
Um,
are you saying that it's often depressurizing to set a fantasy? Interesting. Okay.
yeah, I definitely think so. Um, and that's the number one thing that I look for when goal setting. Right? Uh, don't tell me like the best case scenario for everything. I mean that's great to kind of have it there, but what's the step before you get there, and what's the step before that step, and what's the step before that step, and you kind of start reverse engineering it to, well, what's the step now? Because
Hmm.
that's the one that I'm worried about, and what are you going to do to take that one step right now?
Interesting. So when you're thinking about goal setting, then um, how much time do you let somebody just like play or brainstorm or whatever before coming back to kind of the systematics of it, or do you?
uh, that's really up to the person. um, I've made so many mistakes in the past in trying to um, you know throw the bucket of cold water on people and like just give them the real big hard truth. Response is often not that great, and it kind of puts a strain in the coaching relationship because like all you're doing is crushing my dreams rather than like being productive in that process. So I just start asking questions that will bring the people back to reality and get them to understand, like, yeah, this may not be happening after all. Uh, I think there's really a set of questions that are my go-tos, and they may kind of sound differently in the language that I use, depending on the context of that particular conversation. Uh, but basically, okay, so you want to do this. What are you doing right now that would suggest that that is possible? Um, and yeah, even though you said not to get into it, let's kind of use a popular New Year's one: lose X amount of pounds, as far as losing weight. And that could be, oh yeah, I want to lose 30 pounds. Okay, fantastic. What are you doing right now? Like, how many pounds did you lose last week or last month? And no, I actually put on 5 pounds. Okay, right? So you want to lose 30, but you're currently gaining 5 a month. So, that kind of starts putting things into perspective as far as, how about you don't focus on losing 30 and just kind of, you know, get your stuff together and manage to stabilize your weight for a little while. And, what behaviors and what steps of action should be taken for that to happen. Um,
So when you're thinking about short versus long term, how often do your clients how often do you think they need to see that really big vision to stay focused in the day to day? So if somebody wants to lose 30 pounds and you think realistically it's going to take a year and a half, right? How much do you let them think about that 30 pounds while they're losing 2 pounds a week, or whatever the number is?
Yeah, I don't have a straight up answer for that because people are so different.
Hmm.
Um, there's folks who's very goals oriented and eyes on the prize type of mentality, and everything that's happening, like the first pound or the first 5 or 10, like they're not even looking at that. They're just thinking 30, 30, 30, 30, and that works for them. However, there's other people who may have lost 10 pounds, but it's still not 30, and they just focus too much on what's not happening and not what has actually been happening, and will get discouraged, um, or just be very low self-esteem wise and start doubting themselves on whether or not it's possible. A lot of times because they had false expectations as to how long that was going to take, and they may be doing fantastic, but it's hard to actually convince them.
Yeah, gosh, I've seen that happen so often where miscommunication, lack of communication, poor expectations up front. A coach might think that they're doing a great job with the client, and the client just has no concept of what reality should look like. And I then see the client feeling like they're letting the coach down. So it kind of starts this vicious spiral here and there. So if you're thinking about turning that goal into a reality, so, and I know that we're jumping a little bit, so this is not procedural, but if the goal is turning into a reality, how do you help them turn it into habit? How do you help them make it something that is higher and higher likelihood of actually being successful?
Um, Again, I can think of several different scenarios, for somebody who is just starting in the process and they have no idea how to make it happen and have very little awareness as to what they're doing. That's another one of the questions that I used. Like, can you give me an example of another time in your life where you were reaching for a particular goal and it seemed like it was going to be impossible, but you made it happen? And how did you make it happen?
Hmm.
And then you know behaviors are behaviors, and being disciplined is being disciplined regardless of exactly what it is that you're doing, but they can tie emotions back to that point in time, and it kind of helps them through that process. uh, if another way to do it on sort of like a person that's a little bit easier on themselves, if you want to call them that, uh, you have to celebrate to some degree the small benchmarks and the small stepping stones. I'm sorry, and that doesn't mean it's really not. Maybe celebrates the wrong word, but it's more like acknowledging. Like, hey, did you see what just happened? And why do you think that this happened? And have them kind of enlist the things and the behaviors that they've been doing that leads to the positive results. um, and then I think the biggest factor there is to like come back and say, I mean, you did this, right? So that they understand. Like I just gave you, like, maybe I gave you some ideas on what you should do, but you took those you took that advice and you made it happen. So like
Hmm.
this is you. Because then they start, again, it just becomes more personal for them. The coach didn't make me lose weight or didn't put X amount of pounds on my back squat or whatever. Like, he guided me, and look what I did,
Yeah,
right? And you feel a lot better when you
yeah,
face it that way.
I think that that's such a key insight. I know we're not necessarily speaking to all coaches here, but it's a good insight for a coach to think about, where you're trying to help the client make these changes, not make the client need you over and over and over and over to get better. And I think that unfortunately a lot of coaches create that dependent at all times relationship that is ultimately, I think, ultimately destructive if that's how it kind of gets built out. But if you have a client that is going really well for a little while and then falls off for whatever reason, and let's say it's a legitimate reason, they have a death in the family and all of a sudden they are knocked off of the horse. How have you found that has been beneficial to help them get back on when there's a real reason that knocked them off? I know it
That
depends
actually,
on the person as well, but
yeah, but that happens pretty often, actually. And the holidays is nobody has to die. Like the holidays is a perfect example of that. People just MIA for 14 days, no workouts, haven't replied or anything. And then they're coming back and freaking out. So first thing that I try to do is, uh, ask, like, do you understand what happened? Right? Do you understand why you're feeling like shit? Do you understand why you gain weight? So forth and so on. Um, Hopefully, and because of because I work the way that I work, I get nowadays I get very few. Oh, I have no idea, right? Like usually it's like, yeah, because like I'm supposed to be doing this and working on that and that and that, and I completely did the opposite. And they'll list,
Mm-hmm.
where they messed up. So I think that's like the biggest and most important thing there is, do you understand where it went wrong? Um, and then I follow that up with a question, like same thing. I didn't lose those pounds for you. You did. So what are you going to do about it now?
Yeah.
Right? And then, yeah, you undid it. Now, what are you going to do to make it happen?
Yeah, man, that's what I love about you. It's straight to the point. Um, I think it's so important for people to recognize that we need to be buying the long-term trend. So it's like there is nobody in the world who goes in a straight line up. There's nobody in the world that can do that. But we're being sold this notion that we have to be this much more productive and this much stronger and this much fitter all the time. And it's not realistic for people to do that. It's the people who go, it's the stock chart that kind of does this, but it's consistently getting better. And I think that comes back to this whole idea of reality fantasy. If you're building something that has realistic expectations to it, and then you build in those daily habits, you can almost start to build in 14 days of relaxation in there, because you are aware enough to know that, okay, it's 14 days off, and I know that, okay, maybe I'm not going to be getting better as fast, but if that completely de-stresses your brain, that could get you set for the next year's run. And it's when people stay off of that trend line that gets them in trouble, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I have an analogy I think you will personally love. I just tell them, these are the right behaviors. These are your good decisions, and these would be bad behaviors, or less than ideal behaviors or decisions. Every time you make a good decision, you put $1 in the bank into your savings account, and you're putting dollars in and in and in. If you want to eat out, if you want to do a cheat meal, if you don't want to work out, that's $1 that comes out, right? So you're the one who's saving money. You're the one who decides what's acceptable and what you're going to pull out of savings. Um, and that kind of makes sense, and it it pulls people away from asking, or like trying to ask me for permission to do something. Like, is this okay? I don't know. Like, you need to think if it's okay for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it okay for you to take one step back after 10 good steps? If you deem that to be okay, then fantastic. If it's unacceptable for you, then there's your answer, right? But they do need to understand that, and there's no way in where the bad decisions or bad behaviors kind of jump into the good pot. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's always gonna be a step back, and these will always be a step forward.
It's so interesting. One of the most simple things that I've had the most success with. Now, keep in mind, this I would generally use with very fitness enthusiast type folks, not necessarily high level athletes, but the concept still remains. Is I just say to them, make 2 better decisions every day, and like as a starting point, it's just like, I don't care how good your decisions are or what you believe. Like, are they premium level decisions or not? Just make 2 better decisions per day. And I'll have people come back in 2 weeks. It's like, oh my God, the level of awareness that I have around what I'm doing now is so different than it was 2 weeks ago, because I'm just asking myself the question, to your point, am I putting $1 in or taking $1 out? And then people are great. It's like, I'm going to take $4 out this week. It's like, cool. You know why you're doing it, and you can have fun with it, and then we can get back at it.
Yeah, and it's the principles on the point that you suggested. Like, maybe nothing happens if you take 14 days off, but you have had to have saved enough money over time. So there's your whole consistency point. um, you know, build and save enough, and then potentially you can dig into or break the piggy bank a little bit, and really nothing happens. You're okay.
Yeah, exactly. Henry, this was great, man. I really appreciate you coming on today. I always look forward to these. We will see everybody next time. Thanks, guys.
Yep.